Okay, hi. I'm Sarah McLaughlin, and I'm the president and publisher of House of Anansi Press. And I welcome you tonight to this night of steamy reads in hot and sticky downtown Toronto. The reason that we endeavored to do this night was because in the office we've sort of been shocked by the massive success of these books, the 50 Shades of Grey and all the versions thereof, and how many copies they're selling and how they've become kind of this crazy phenomena. And what we thought was, well, you know, we know sexy books can sell, but we have writers who write really great prose, really great story, and often are quite sexy indeed. And so we thought we would ask at least two of them, the wonderful Lynn Crosbie, the magnificent Lisa Moore, to join us here at Sneaky Dee's to do a bit of a, well, I'll let them decide whether or not it's really going to be steamy and sexy, but we put the option out there for them. And what we want to show you is that books can be this, but they can also be beautifully written, extremely well presented, and perhaps even more provocative than what's selling by the truckload out there at the stores. Come on in, everybody. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start with Lynn Crosbie. In May, we published Life is About Losing Everything, and that book has received the most extraordinary reviews from coast to coast. It's been called superb, brilliant, darkly comic. It is beyond description, and I'm not even going to try to tell you what it's about. But I love this writer. She's a great friend. She's a magnificent personality, and she's extraordinarily talented. And it takes a lot to get her to come out and do a reading. So everybody, would you please join me in welcoming Lynn Crosbie to the stage?
I don't need these. What do I do? I'm just going to throw them to the crowd. Okay. Oh, okay. Hey, so who feels sexy tonight? Okay, I'm here to ruin that for you. Because my beautiful friend and publisher, Sarah McLaughlin, asked me to be a part of this night, apparently not having read my book. Because it is not a sexy book. It is a book about being sexually rejected by cruel fat men. So I did go through it very carefully, and I chose a few stories. They're very short, by the way, so I'll get that panicky feeling like, she'll never shut up, never. And I'm going to read a couple that at least lurch towards the idea of love and sex, the gooey center of love. And also I have a hickey, so there. Okay. Thank you. The hickey got some applause. That's good. The first one is called, and this is from the Kama Sutra. That's right. And it's called, why is this on midget height, though? What? Help. Am I screwing up the podcast? Am I ruining the glorious podcast? Very, very tall, hickeyed woman. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. 16 bites and scratches, 16 slaps and screams. The wide hips and wasp waist, scrolls of hair, someone I used to be, among the vines and mangoes. The embrace of a tall man folding into it like a dove. An amorous dog's fierce bite, a golden foot braceleted and descending the temple stairs. The partial body of the helper as she and I fall off the side of the bed and hang there like a bat. The man who talked like Floyd the barber and made blender drinks equals the Congress of a crow. Yakshi in a leopard shift in leopard slides, excavated from the ruins of Pompeii, a bullwhip and a bottle of happiness. Frozen on Kajuharo, Lana's nervous kiss. The retention of semen in labeled envelopes, DNA, name, date. The petals of the mandala, Billy's bouquet signed, I would die for you. The erotic, comic, sympathetic, furious, or angry, heroic, terrible, odious, wondrous, or marvelous, peaceful, all of this, birds feeding on dirt again. You come home and I am climbing a vine. What is lost is some sense of being alive. Okay. No, stop applauding because it just makes me feel self-conscious. And Leanne, I think you understood that DNA reference. This one's called The Cooler. It's about the man of my dreams. He came to my house to clean the eaves troughs, and when Frank started barking, he threatened to fire him down the stairs. He was cleaning his fingernails with a switchblade. He had black handprints on his t-shirt and a lightning bolt of hair. "You seem like a lonely broad," he said, after I brought out his sixth beer, and he smiled, revealing sharp gray incisors. "A man could do a lot for you," he added. "I mean, like bulldozing and roofing. Heavy lifting," he said. "Maybe more." "Yes, I live in a tripwired, triggered bomb site with extensive surveillance equipment and starved vicious animals," he snarled, apropos of nothing. "You don't need to know about that. All you need to do is clean my clothes and make me chicken pot pies." By then, we were sitting outside watching huge bees lunge at the grapevines. "Aren't you being paranoid?" I asked. I want to add, "What are you, public enemy number one?" But there was something in his eyes that suggested a homicidal aversion to sarcasm. He catcalled at a girl walking by the house with shiny black hair and a silver dress. "Don't worry about it, Chunky," he said. "Man's got a look, is all." "That's a compliment," he added when I flushed. A compliment he emphasized with a sharp pinch. I'm not making this up. He comes to see me in the middle of the night and commits felonies against me that I love. This morning when I woke up, he was gone. Someone had posted a cruel picture of me online. There are many corresponding comments. "I know where they live." The cooler carved into the bathroom wall, spitting blood into the sink. Loneliness is the devil and tortures you in its name. He uses a rake to lift up arson after arson, leaves me snakes and bats and ferocious rats for company, and it rains black. I scratch his back to remind him I was there, alive and unwell, wandering into love, the beauty of his crimes. And thank you so much. Woo! Okay. And this is my last story. It's a love story about somebody I loved a very, very long time ago. Only you, and you can't hear me. He looks out the window most of the time now, sitting on a hard wooden chair. "What are you looking at?" I ask, half listening when he says, "The woman's octopus baby, its fleecy tentacles. The tiny alien crafts, beeping radix malarum est cupiditas, and remember to floss. Bottles of Grecian formula, tinting the leaves of the trees, handsomely, naturally. Your shoe, the shoe I drank champagne from, your white satin shoe. Yes, I say, yes, or oh, okay. This takes place in the world where Stephen and I met again and stayed together. We were married in the Church of the Resurrection, and we had a honeymoon in Niagara Falls. We pounded that heart-shaped bed into a circle, and during the days we walked under the water in yellow raincoats, hand in hand. And all of this up to and beyond our spotlit wedding dance to More Than a Feeling, when he dipped me and my golden hair glanced the floor, began when I was 17 and visiting his local bar after a fight with the cruel cinephile. It was a late summer night. Just beyond us were apple orchards livid with fruit and the Richelieu River running wild under the anxious stars. The night he walked up to me and said quietly, "You look different." "I like your hair," he said as I stared at him imperiously. He touched it. It was bright red and razor cut, and walked away. He touched it. It was longer than it had been in high school and sun-bleached, and held my face and kissed me. The kiss is torrid and warms me from an incalculable distance, from the place where dispatches originate, arriving to me as faint sighs and shivers. I know that we have children and only love each other. When he is away, I sleep on his side of the bed and cry all night. He smacks my ass every morning and says, "Come here, baby." We go to the high school reunion together, and he and I don't recognize a soul. And when he is old, I am old. We take care of each other. "A storm is coming," he says, standing up and upsetting the salt shaker. I draw our initials in its discharge and hold him until we are a single breath in the dark world that shadows this one, the one where we both get to live. Thank you.
don't know what you were talking about. That was plenty sexy. And I have read it a few times. Okay, so our second reader tonight comes to us from Newfoundland, although I think she's racked up more frequent flyer points flying all over this country and all over the world than any other writer I know right now in Canada. Lisa's published with Anansi. We've done Open, Degrees of Nakedness. We did her first novel, Alligator, her second novel, February, and I'm happy to tell you that this time next year there'll be a third novel out, the title of which may change, but so I won't bother saying what it is. Lisa Moore is, I think I don't have to tell any of you, one of Canada's most accomplished and talented writers of fiction. She's now being published pretty much all over the world. Last year, she was on the long list for the Booker Prize. She's won the Commonwealth Prize. She's been nominated for the Giller twice. And she also happens to be, aside from all those sickeningly great accolades, one of the most wonderful people I know. And she herself is extraordinarily sexy and writes some pretty steamy prose. So without further ado, I give you Lisa Moore.
Sexy, yes, but short. Yeah, that good? Oh, thank you, Sarah. That was a beautiful introduction. And thank you, Lynn. That was really powerful writing and a hard act to follow. Anansi is putting out a selected stories of mine, and so I'm going to read from Open tonight and from the story Natural Parents. And I'm just going to start right in the middle. He was a man, dreaming he was a butterfly, dreaming he was a man. The winter night, I should say that in Newfoundland, we have more sex than anybody in Canada per capita. That's a hard fact. Some people say statistics aren't hard facts, but and I think it has to do with the weather. So this story happens in the cold. This is sex in the cold. He was a man dreaming he was a butterfly, dreaming he was a man. The winter night asserted itself, snow pinging the glass. He could hear music from downtown. The red S of the Scotiabank was in the top right corner of Alex's window. It had a chef's hat of snow glowing pinkly. When Lyle was 18, he'd slept with a girl named Rachel he'd met in first-year university. Rachel was 17, and he slept with her maybe half a dozen times. The first time, they'd met in the Breezeway, a raucous university bar with roving colored spotlights. They'd never made an effort to get together after that. They just happened upon each other. The last time they met like this was in the wind tunnel between the library and the chemistry building. She was wearing a long candy cane striped scarf. It stood out in front of her, rippling. The wind was blowing her across a skim of ice, and she was squealing, and she slid into his arms. Their chests smacked, and when he bent his nose into the icy fox fur trim, he could smell her lip gloss. It was 4:30 in the afternoon, already dark. His wrists stuck out of the leather gloves his mother had insisted he wear, and he remembered that his wrist bones felt like glass, that a sharp bang might have cleanly snapped off his hands. It was below zero, well below zero. They'd gotten a bus to her parents' house. The windows of the bus were gray with salt, and a man sat beside him with crutches that cuffed his forearms, and his legs were twisted and stiff like pipe cleaners. Rachel told Lyle that he should stop reading philosophy. She said, "Literature's such a kick. You've got to read that." And she looked out the window over her shoulder as if one of the stout, soft-covered penguins she had jammed in her knapsack, Middlemarch, Anna Karenina, or Crime and Punishment, was unfolding in the street. He told her his wrists were cold, and she took the glove off his right hand and put her searing mouth over his wrist bone so it bristled with needles like a startled porcupine. When they arrived at her parents' house somewhere in Mount Pearl, she lifted the curled real estate guide from the mailbox, a hardened baton sheathed in ice. She poked his stomach with it, and when he looked down, she slapped his cheek. The ice on the guide smashed to pieces and skittered across the concrete step. The slap left a sting. "That was for nothing," she said, "and don't try anything." She turned her back on him and unlocked the door, and he followed her inside. They smoked some pot in the bathroom, a white gauzy curtain gone yellow with age flying out the open window against the night sky. That evening of lovemaking has come back over him lots of times since. Often when he's tired or drunk, it overtakes him, haunts him. So he can almost smell the crackling hope of the new subdivision, the whiff of cedar and camphor in the pink bedspread ruffles that had been unexpectedly rough against his cheek, the stinky dope meeting the stormy wind. There had been a marmalade cat with a fluffy tail drawing up the gold and rust shag carpet with her nails very near his ear on the living room floor. Pot exacted from him a languid thoroughness while making love. Every touch lost its path, outlived its life expectancy. She had licked under his arm, and that cool trail he'd felt for days afterward while washing dishes for his mother, dopey with the steam rising from the sink and the heat of the oven, or while lazing on the living room carpet before Gilligan's Island and Get Smart with the slippery velvet of the golden retriever's ear in his fingers. The cheeks of her bum, breasts as white as snowflakes, smoky breath, the bitten down fingernails with chipped blue polish. He'd held her arms over her head, both of her wrists in one hand. He'd lowered her bra with his teeth, uncovering a nipple so it peeked out from a crush of eyelet lace, and he could feel with his tongue the roughness of the cotton and the softness of just the very tip of the pink nipple. When his tongue touched her there, she squirmed against him. What a shock her mouth was. A hot working muscle, a current, a force. After they'd taken off each other's clothes, she went into the kitchen for a drink of water. They had a fridge with a door that made crushed ice, and it was the first time he'd seen one. It was a super modern, a reflective black that matched the other appliances. She held the glass under the spout in the door of the fridge, and the machine growled and the glass filled with slush. She drank the whole glass and filled it again, stopping to grin at him, wiping a drip from her chin with the back of her hand. She was wearing a fat mood ring, and it was dark green, which meant, she said, that she was fuckable. He lifted her, taking a cheek of her bum in each of his hands, surprised by how light she was. Her legs wrapped over his hips, and her back was pressed against the door of the fridge. With each thump, they heard jars rattling, glass clinking, something smashed. The engine whirred. She slapped her hand on the black door 3 times. A ready kilowatt magnet scuttled along the gleaming surface to the floor. Rachel spilled the ice over his chest. It felt like flankers spat from a fire, and a line of it glittered their joined bellies. It dug into his thighs. It crunched in their pubic hair, and when he came, it felt like his veins were running with blue antifreeze. So cold, it made sweat spring to his forehead. He kissed her mussy hair. Her bum squeaked against the black door as he set her on her feet. Her mouth was cold from the water like an igloo. She switched on the fluorescent light, and they both began to giggle. The copper cooking pots hung over the stove in order of diminishing size. There was an Esso calendar with a picture of a terrier, a red and white gingham apron tossed over the back of a pine chair, a box of Ritz crackers. Their nakedness boinged forward like something on a trampoline. Nothing in the room had been altered by their sex. The kitchen immured their glittering, star-struck bodies in a sheath of bland fluorescence without giving them a thought. The marmalade cat eyed Lyle through the kitchen doorway. She came into the room and raised her tail. She rubbed herself against the fridge, jutted her chin, and then crossed the black and white tiles to wield her static coat to Lyle's bare calf. The street had turned a perfect, uncanny white. An errant draft raised goosebumps on Lyle's arms. A rectitude stole over him with the chill. There was a sinister note in the freedom he felt in her parents' kitchen. Rachel had been digging in the cupboard and had taken out a tin of chocolate chip cookies. She piled them on the counter and lifted the lid on the illustrated tin. It was the Norman Rockwell of a little girl with a pink bow in her hair and her drawers lowered for a spanking, ink handprints on the wall behind her. Ravenous, Rachel said, her mouth filled with cookies. A paranoia shot through him, made his heart take off the way a cartoon heart, the Roadrunners, might stretch through his brown fur and hang in the air while the rest of his spindly body fell miles and miles to the dusty earth. Lyle couldn't get his jeans on fast enough, hobbling down the hallway from Rachel's bedroom with one pant leg flapping to the side, nearly falling as he dragged the waist over his knees, leaving behind him a trail of coins. He had not walked very far down the new cul-de-sac when a car passed him, plastering a sheet of slush to his shins. The car pulled into Rachel's driveway. Her parents sat for a moment, and then they got out. They had groceries. He watched them make their way up the path, her mother's long coat a gash of fuchsia. He was close enough to hear the aluminum storm door smack behind them. The living room lights came on. He stayed, he had no idea how long, but nothing else happened. The house remained inert. He stood under the street light and watched the snowflakes. He was overwhelmed with the joy of not being caught. He made a decision, almost a pledge, that he would not sleep with Rachel again. Probably he wouldn't even run into her, but if he did, he wouldn't speak to her very much. Lovers slipped out of his life when he was 18 without consequence. He decided the freedom he felt in her kitchen would just be the start. He made a resolution. Beam a mild vertigo from your forehead at all times, like a miner's lamp. In this way, you'd always step to the side when ruin tore down the path behind you. You'd always get out before the parents came home. He knew he was stoned, but he could never discern which perception, stoned or straight, was most accurate. He promised himself he'd keep one set of thoughts in his left hand and the other set in his right. When the phone rang several weeks later, Lyle knew by the sound of his mother's voice it was a girl. His mother said that any girl who called a boy's house had no self-respect. She spoke loud enough to be overheard. The receiver was lying on a long roll of cotton batting with opalescent sparkles and tiny white Christmas lights buried beneath it. Ceramic angels with velvet costumes and paper songbooks were stationed all over the cotton batting. Among them, the receiver looked like an alien spacecraft. Rachel just said his name. She said Lyle. Thank you.
told ya. What we were hoping to do, and I don't even know if I told Lisa and Lynn this, and as I can't see them, I don't know if they're horror on their face or not, but we thought we might take some questions from the audience. We have some questions from our live streaming friends. Would you guys be up for that? Okay, so you have to come up here with me then. Yes, bring your beer, and don't be shy out there in the audience to ask. So I'm going to ask Lynn. The first question has come from Wanda from Facebook. Isn't this fun?
It's an obvious pseudonym.
Do you think?
It's like my mother. I'm not doing this.
So you got to do this because it's good. Okay. So Wanda asked, Lynn, in your book, Life is About Losing Everything, which interestingly, the acronym for that is LILE. You talk about the things you lost. What did you gain from sharing your story?
Oh, come on, really?
Come on, you can do it. For Wanda.
For Wanda.
For Wanda.
From gaining my story, I was able to exercise the story of the former new wave rock star who left his dirty underwear under my bed and told me if I found them, I could keep them as a souvenir. And that story is now free from me and flying like a bird amongst you all. Wanda, thank you very much.
Thank you for that frank and wonderful response. Are they nice looking? Okay. Okay. Has anybody else got a question? Come on, somebody. I'm sure you have a question. Okay, I have a question. So, Lisa, Open was your second collection of short stories. And there's a kind of incredible free abandon in this great sort of sexual escapade that you write. Now that you're an established Canadian literary figure, do you feel at all restrained now in your writing? Do you hold back? Do you feel like you couldn't write that now?
No, I'm still writing sex. I think sex is a great metaphor for
sex.
for coming into being.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. I'm actually, my new novel is about a 24-year-old guy. The protagonist is a 24-year-old guy who escapes prison after 4 years in prison. So he's
pretty sexed up.
Yeah, he's having a good time running on the lam across the country and having sex.
So you can look forward to that next year. Anybody else want to help us out up here?
Walter, ask a question.
Walter, ask a question. Who's Walter?
He's one of my former students.
Walter, do you have a question? No, too shy. All right, so we will say goodnight to our friends on Facebook, and Lynn and Lisa will be here, available to sign books. I should have said earlier that yes, this year we are bringing out a selected Lisa Moore short story under a new imprint that we've developed in celebration of the 45th anniversary of Anansi called The A-List, and that will be available in September.
I'm going to be on their book, The D-List, if anyone's interested in that. Okay.
And I would just like to thank everybody at Anansi for doing a fantastic job and making such great
Thank you, Laura.
books.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Sarah.